First of all, thank you, everybody. Just want to make sure our mics are working. Everybody hears me okay? Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. This is such a wonderful sort of capstone event to what's been a amazing weekend. And we want to thank Don Winslow for being here. It is such a pleasure to be able to sit and talk with you. So thanks so much for making the effort to be here.
Thank you all for coming out. Is that on? And Jim, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for doing this.
You know, you think it's all glamour for a guy like Don who's doing nothing but selling books. But I must tell you, I'm looking at my Twitter yesterday afternoon, and I see the following. So Don Winslow, if you're not a Twitter fan, you first need to get on Twitter and then just follow this guy, and it will raise your spirits every day, or in some cases make you want to burn things down. But he, yesterday at 3:30, tweets the following. Me, Don, I'm at a level of exhaustion I did not know was possible. Agent, the tour is going great. Don, what on God's green earth gave you the idea to send a 68-year-old man on a 30-plus city tour in the U.S. and Europe? Agent, Mick Jagger's 78 and he does it. Don, good talk. You must be exhausted.
I'm a little tired.
What's your schedule been like?
Basically, it's get up, do media, interviews on Zoom or telephone mostly, go to the airport, fly to a city, do media, and come to an event in the evening. But I listen, I don't want to whine. You know, we haven't been able to do this sort of thing for a while. Everything material I own in this world, I owe to readers. And so it's nice to be able to come out and say thank you. So thank you.
I was going to say, it's a high-class problem you have, Don.
Yep.
It really is. So I've lost count. City on Fire, and for those of you who haven't read it, read it. It's just awesome. Is this your 22nd, 23rd bestseller? Where are we? And don't pretend you don't know the exact number.
22.
22.
Catch 22.
Amazing.
Yeah, it amazes me. You know, I don't know how it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I will say, I do have a bone to pick with you.
Uh-oh.
I started to read it about 2 weeks ago, and I had a busy day.
All right.
And so with a cup of coffee at about 7:30 in the morning, I sat down. I'm just going to take a look, but obviously I have a busy day in front of me. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I hadn't moved from the chair, and the thought bubble over my head wasn't saying very nice things about Don, although I was actually feeling grateful that I had cracked the cover of his latest work. Can you, the master of the pitch, just for those who haven't read it, what is this one about?
This one is a first of a trilogy about a guy named Danny Ryan, who starts life as a fisherman and a longshoreman in my hometown in Rhode Island, little fishing town. And he marries the daughter of the Irish mob boss. Danny's father having been the Irish mob boss before that, but he drank himself out of that position. And because of his loyalty, he gets dragged into a war with the Italian mafia. Having said that, it's a retelling of Homer's Iliad set in contemporary crime world.
When you have an idea, I mean, that's high concept. How long had this idea been kicking around your head?
I did the math the other day. Okay, this is embarrassing. You ready? I wrote the first sentence of this book, and it hasn't changed a syllable, 27 years ago.
So what took you? Like, what if you wrote this 27 years ago, why are we talking about it now?
A number of reasons. It took me a long time to figure out, you know. When you start rewriting the Iliad, the Aeneid, the Odyssey, Greek tragic dramas, because they're all in these 3 books, it took a while to figure out how do you do that in 1987, 1991, 1996, respectively. 2, I was writing a few other books.
Yeah.
I wrote this sort of big, thick drug trilogy, you know, that was 23 years of my life on that beat. But to be really honest, because I wouldn't come here to lie to y'all, it took me a while to go home.
Well, that was my next question. So I fell in love in Providence. I got engaged in Providence. I'm still married to the woman I fell in love with and got engaged to in Providence. Providence is an awesome place to set any novel, but certainly a crime novel.
Yeah.
But Rhode Island's home to you.
Yeah.
Is there extra pressure when you're writing about home?
Yeah, absolutely. I left home when I was 17 because at that time in Rhode Island, on the shore, there was nothing for me there. You know, the factories had moved to the Carolinas. You were there in, 89, I want to say.
Late 80s, yeah.
Yeah. The fishing had been played out, so even if you wanted to be a fisherman, that was a tough go. My old man used to drive me to about 500 yards from the fishing processing plant, and you could smell it from there. And he would say, if you don't buckle down and start studying, because I was a terrible student, I'm a professional novelist who flunked senior English in high school.
Let that be a lesson.
You're going to spend your life shoveling fish guts in there. And he was right. So I left, and I did all these other things. Came back for short visits. But it was only when my mom was in her declining years, frankly, this being Mother's Day, and needed help. That my wife and I started to go back for longer periods of time, and I started falling in love with the place again.
Were you seeing a city or a state that you just hadn't seen before? Had Providence changed, Rhode Island changed, or had you changed?
I had changed. I mean, look, the economy has come back there mostly due to tourism, and I guess high tech. No, I had changed. I think that, look, going home for everyone, I think, is hard.
Can be.
Can be. One's memories of one's youth, some of them are really good, some of them aren't. Yeah. And so going back there, and mind you, I wrote these books in the house I grew up in, on the front porch of my mom's old house, because I go to work at 5:30 in the morning and didn't want to wake people up. And so I'd sneak down, make a quiet cup of coffee, and go outside, go on the porch, to sit on an old futon that's still there, and a coffee table, and my laptop. And sometimes I was like Bob Cratchit, right? I had gloves on with the fingertips, cut out in a scarf and a hat because it was cold, and wrote it there. And so I think that in a lot of ways I had to confront my youth, confront my childhood and my teenage years.
I mean, I'm thinking as you're painting this picture, it must have been hard to type at some point with all the other ghosts that were on your shoulders.
Yeah. This book starts on a beach where I walked after my dad's funeral. After my mom's funeral, there wasn't one because it was during COVID, but months later when we could come back, I took sort of a memorial walk there. I think it's on my mind today, So yeah, there's nothing in this book that happens more than 30 minutes from that door.
You've been tremendously successful writing about all kinds of other settings. Now you're writing about home. So just tell me a little bit about that extra added pressure as you are honoring the people that shaped you and the place that shaped you, and maybe also needing to stare down a few demons from the... So is that their frontal lobe the whole time?
Yeah, and I think that's part of why it took 27 years to say I'm going to do it. I would pick it up and set it down, pick it up and set it down. All three of the books, which are done, by the way. They're all written, of this trilogy. And I would tell myself I'm setting it down because I'm busy, writing the drug book, or I'm busy writing the New York cop book, or whatever.
Or maybe you're just getting some arm's length that's necessary to be able to interface with this heavy lift.
No, I think that was it. I mean, look, no one has accused me of being mature, right?
Thank goodness.
I think it took maybe a little more maturity to make peace with it. In some ways, I Oh, maybe because I'm in a church, I'm feeling in a confessional mood, but I think in some ways I always felt guilty about leaving. You know,
Survivor's guilt?
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, 3 of my classmates perished out there on those fishing boats.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of my classmates never left. And they had different kinds of lives. I think very full, good lives, but very different from... I went to Africa, I went to Europe, I lived in the UK. I kind of went out to really get the world, because that's what I wanted as a kid. And so coming back, I think there was a little guilt. Now, there was more than a little guilt.
Yeah, and it wasn't, by the way, that you just led another life. You led a tremendously successful life. Let's talk about that. You're 38, I think, when you first get published.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that journey. You were an anti-terror trainer. You were a trial consultant, an investigator. But I think the thought bubble over your head was, I want to write.
Yeah.
How did it happen?
Well, I'd wanted to write since I was, I think, 5 or 6 years old.
You just knew it as a kid?
Knew it. My mom was a librarian. My dad was a sailor who was one of the great storytellers of all time, you know, verbally. Grew up in the theater. And so I thought that would be the very, very best thing to be. But as you alluded to, it took a number of decades for the world to come to that conclusion with me, you know. And so I was just trying to cobble together a living. Did not come from money, you know. Wanted to see the world. And so I knew that I had to make it pay for itself.
When you left Rhode Island, you go to the University of Nebraska, I believe. Is
That's
that
right?
right?
Yeah.
And then are you writing all along?
I'm writing plays, which were getting produced. And because I thought that's where I was headed. I thought I was going to be a journalist or a playwright. I went to Nebraska to go to the journalism school there. It's at a great journalism school. Learned how to write a declarative sentence, right?
Always helpful.
Yep. So what I always fall back to now, if I'm in the deep grass, right? You know?
Absolutely. We all fall in love with our own ways of articulating something and forget that maybe the smallest number of syllables is the key to writing the most accessible sentence.
That's right. You know, subject, verb, object, you know. And then the university sent me to Africa as a young journalist. I was 19 in South Africa during the apartheid days and up in the war in what was then Rhodesia. Arrested, I think, 3 times in South Africa and finally deported.
Scared when that's happening?
Always. But, you know, in all candor, I had an American passport. I knew that I was, you know, playing with a net underneath me. They weren't going to do anything really terrible to a white American, except come to my apartment one night and say you're on the next flight out.
Yeah.
You know, took me to dinner, put me on an airplane to Nairobi. So I was just trying to make a living. Went to New York to become a writer, was a starving writer within hours, you know, because the New Yorker didn't immediately sign me, nor have they since. Right. And, you know, I just wanted to do interesting things.
But there's still a 16 years between graduating college and publishing your first book.
Yeah.
Was the dream always alive?
It was alive. There were times when it was certainly dormant. Because I think, again, being honest about it, I think that there was a crisis of confidence, that I got to a point of thinking, you know, I don't have the talent to do this.
All right, so let's talk about that, because and I guess I want to just say thank you and express my gratitude about something you do on a regular basis that enough people in the world don't do. And if you read Don's Twitter feed, there are messages of inspiration, aspiration, and perspiration that are delivered often.
Yeah.
I'm actually really moved by that. I'll tell you why. Because a couple times a week, I'll forward them to my wife, who is a wonderful writer trying to get her own traction. And the message you give her and everybody else is, hey, there's only one thing non-negotiable in trying to become a writer. Don't stop.
Right.
The only way you fail is to stop trying.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about what your experience as a writer has taught you about that. And I'm sure in this room we have a number of people who would like to think of themselves and become one day professional writers. Tell me about this.
What I always say to aspiring writers, say who haven't been published yet, yet being the critical word, that if you do that, if you on a regular basis wrestle with, it used to be the empty page, now it's the blank screen, I guess, you are a writer. You are. It's a verb before it's a noun, and we're colleagues. You have my respect. I hope I have yours. Don't ever let anyone take it away from you, but the person who's most likely to take it away from you is you.
Can I just, the person who's most likely to take it away from you, the dream, is you.
Yeah, you know, I was, as I said, cobbling together a living. At one point, I was doing trial consultancy and investigation work in California. Then I would go to Oxford University and direct Shakespeare plays for a month for international high school kids, which a job I loved. Then my wife and I, would fly to Kenya, where I would do a month or two leading photographic safaris, and then back to California to pick up a case or two. And between those activities, I was trying to pay mortgages and rents, and in there we had a kid, you know, and I wasn't really writing a lot.
Was it nagging at you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then a buddy of mine, in fact, I was just on the phone with him from the green room here, who was a professor at Columbia, was the guy who hired me to direct Shakespeare at Oxford. And one day at Oxford, he said, you know, you're always talking about writing this book. Why don't you do it? So about a month and a half later, I'm in Africa with a malaria relapse. Because once you get it, you always, anytime you get the flu or anything, it comes back. And dysentery, amoebic dysentery. And I'm huddled at a fire. It's 4:30 in the morning.
Sounds like the perfect time to start writing down.
Yeah, and you think, well, kind of, because you think, you know what, this might not last. You know, what I did wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't not dangerous sometimes. And I remember the great Joe Wambaugh, who's since become a friend, right? Big hero of mine, said that when he was an L.A. murder cop, he was a homicide.
He wrote all those great cop novels, right?
Great cop novels, but when he wanted to be a novelist and he was still a cop, he determined to write 10 pages a day, no matter what. And I remember, I can remember like it was yesterday, the cliche goes, but I'm sitting by a fire doing this, right? It's 4 a.m, and my sort of African godfather, Peter Cagnolo, who taught me, you know, everything, is sitting there, and I thought, I can't do 10 pages, but I can do 5. I can do 5 no matter what. So for the next 3 years, whether I was in Africa or England, I was transferred to China for a while, wherever I was, I wrote 5 pages a day, no matter what.
Put your tuchus in the chair.
Yeah. Sometimes it wasn't a chair. I mean, I did it in tents. I did it on buses. I did it on trains. I did it on planes, wherever I was. And 3.5 years later, that's about right, I had a book. Now, 14 publishers turned that book down, including the publisher I'm with now. I like to remind them of that.
This is an important point.
Yeah.
I was once talking to Mitch Albom, who's written the world's best-selling memoir,
Right.
Tuesdays with Morrie,
Yep.
and I think it was 16 publishers turned him down.
Yeah.
And I said to him, do you ever remind any of those people that turned down the world's best-selling memoir? He goes, well, I don't, but my agent does.
Yeah. And all during that time, you get these rejection letters, which is cliche, everyone gets them. Some people save them. I don't know why you grow noxious weeds in your garden, I'm going to go out and water the poison ivy now, I would throw them away. And while they were rejecting my first book, I was writing my second with the same character.
How did you develop the rhinoceros skin that is so necessary so that the rejections would sort of bounce off or at least not impede you from pounding away at your next book?
During that time, I had read, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I had read it, that 1 out of every 10,000 people who puts writer down as their occupation on their tax forms, 1 out of every 10,000 makes a living at it. So this is going to sound horrible, but it's the truth. Again, I didn't come here to lie to you. What I said to myself was, I am sincerely sorry for the other 9,999, but in this life, that's my slot. Maybe not the next one, maybe this life, I'm taking that.
And how long to get an agent? You said you got turned down 14 times. Like, how long were you living in the world of I'm the 1 in 10,000 before you actually got some confirmation from the universe that you were not insane?
About 1.5 years, and I was on a stakeout when I got the call that St. Martin's had bought my first book for a whopping $7,500. Because people think, and it does happen, you write that first book, you get it published, and then you're made. I was 7 published books into my career before I could quit my day jobs.
So, and that's it. There is this. All writers talk about the calm before the calm, right? they finish the book, it gets off, it goes to the bookstore. Nothing. And here you are. You said it took you how many books?
7.
So you start with A Cool Breeze on the Underground in 1991.
Right.
It takes you to 2005 till I think you're doing the Cartel trilogy,
Yep.
which is bonkers successful.
Well, not at first.
Tell me.
I wrote the first book, Power of the Dog, which has nothing to do with the currently Oscar-nominated film. But God bless every success. I like Campion. I like her work. Go with God. It's great. Power of the Dog sold nothing in the United States until a book called The Cartel came out. And, I never planned those to be a trilogy.
Really?
Oh, yeah. No, I quit after each one of those drug books. I promised my wife I would not go back to that world.
Because you felt it was dark? Because there was risk, emotional risk, physical risk? What?
All
why?
of the above. All of the above. I wrote Dog, Power of the Dog. It took me 6 years, which is a career killer for a crime writer. You're supposed to have a book out about every year and a half. It was 5 years between books because it took me so long to write that research. It was 3 years of research and about 3 years of writing. So I hadn't had a book out in 5 years. The reading public had pretty much forgotten about me. At some point after Dog came out, I think I had $37 in the bank. So, yeah. I stopped I said I would not go back to the drug world. But then I'm sitting on the sidelines writing sort of happy surfer books. Things got so much worse in Mexico, unimaginably worse than we thought in our worst nightmares. And I thought, this is immodest, but it's accurate, I thought I could explain to the American and European reading public what was going on in a way that, pardon me, the media wasn't doing, and certainly politicians were not doing. And so one morning, I don't know, I got up and I was typing,
I want to ask you about process and that notion of one morning getting up and what you do each morning as you get up. Before I do, though, I'm just struck as you're explaining this to me. You publish in 91, and I get it. It wasn't the beginning of some great chapter. You're still talking about 14 years later.
Right.
Were you still developing as a writer?
Yes.
Not just as you were a professional, but as you began to be successful, does your skill set still deepen, and how does it continue to refine?
It has to. I would hate to think that I'm not better at my job than I was 40 years ago or 30 years ago.
In what ways?
Oh, I think I'm much. I think I'm much better at saying, I'll never use 8 words if 7 will do. I think I'm a better structuralist. I think as I get older, maybe I see the world in deeper ways. I think I'm more compassionate than I was, and I think that compassion has started to show up in my work.
Meaning what? That your eye is drawn to those who are suffering more as a writer?
23 years on the drug beat,
Yeah.
you see a lot of suffering. And it's not like I sit in my office just researching on the net.
When you go and do your research, do you hire a fixer? Do you hire muscle? How close have you come in terms of close calls? Because you're seeing stuff, I can see it has an emotional effect on you. I've done similar
I know you
work,
have, yeah.
and people don't realize the toll it takes on you psychically, but how do you do it?
Well, I have a very specific way of researching. I go from history to journalism to documents, and then when I feel I have enough base knowledge that I'm not going to waste people's time, I go to people. In those books, it started with, young gangbangers in San Diego. And then, to drug dealers, you spend a lot of time in prisons, because that's where you find these people.
You speak Spanish?
I hear it. I can understand it. I'm not very good at speaking it. It's too fast, yeah. And then it was, as you might expect, the funerals.
Ugh.
Toward the last book, I wrote a lot about addiction. So I spent time with heroin addicts, some of whom did not make it.
This is where the compassion, I'm sensing, as you say, I'm more compassionate. You spend close time with people who are in the grips. And if you are not compassionate, you're kind of a waste of a life,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned. But it feels like this is when I'm understanding exactly what you're saying about this opens a new level of depth to your
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah, my first 5 books are about a graduate student who can't get through graduate school because he's being sent out to do private investigation cases. That was me.
Yeah.
Right? And they're pretty light, and then, I sort of accidentally got into this drug world, and it's not light.
So for, again, people who are in the audience that want to write, I always find this to be fascinating. Share with us, if you will, your process. Are you up every day at the same time? Is it, as you said, this 10 minutes or 10 pages a day turn into... But can you share with us what a day in Don Winslow's professional life looks like?
It's really dull. You're going to be really disappointed. I wish it were more romantic. I really do, but it's not. I get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning to be at my desk at 5:30. So before I'm at my desk, I scan 5 newspapers, and I'm very OCD about it. It has to be in a certain order. It's really sick. I'm a little disturbed about it.
I love this.
And then I go to work, and then usually my wife comes by around 9:30 or 10. This is when we're in California. Live on an old ranch way out in the country north of San Diego, and then we walk somewhere between 4 to 6 miles.
Are endorphins important in the process of writing? How
To
so?
me,
Yeah, what do they
absolutely.
do?
I don't think I write strong unless I feel strong. It's that simple. I think I write weak if I'm not strong.
So when I write and come back in the old days from a run and now from a walk, I'm full of ideas.
Yeah.
And then some of them just aren't good.
Right.
But you vomit out. Do you vomit on
Yeah.
your page?
Oh, yeah.
So writing is editing as far as you're concerned.
Absolutely. I write very, very fast. The early drafts, I don't care about the reader at all. At all. I'm just in it for myself. As the drafts go by, 8, 9, 10, then all in those late drafts, all I'm caring about is the reader. The way it falls on the reader's eye, the way it falls on the reader's ear.
What time did you say you're getting up?
Usually 4:30 or 5.
Don, you've sold a lot of books. Honestly.
Yeah.
Is it a little harder to get out of bed since you really don't need to?
I don't like getting up at 4:30 or 5.
You don't have to.
I know. Look, those characters are going to yap at you all night.
Mm-hmm.
I have a wicked insomnia problem. It's just at times you want to say, Danny, just shut up. Just like tomorrow, I'll listen, to you.
Do you keep a pad bedside?
I don't, no. I did a couple of times, and then you read it, and it's total gibberish.
Yeah.
Although one time, my favorite sentence ever that I've ever written. Ready?
Yeah.
No one knows how the chimp got the revolver.
Is that a 2 a.m. special?
Yeah, and I have no idea where it came from. But I ended up writing the novella,
So as I was prepping and thinking about this conversation, the guy's as good as it gets in terms of answering questions. There's nothing you're going to ask Don that's going to stump him, that he's going to fumfer through. And all I could come up with was this.
This sounds like a setup, man. I'm scared.
How do you write a sex scene? They're good, by the way.
Thank you very much.
They're very good.
Thank you.
Where are the lines?
That question's been asked several times when my wife's been in the audience. I'll give you a serious answer.
Please.
A sex scene is like any other action scene. You want to obviously give the action, which in this case is sex, but you also want it to reveal and develop character. Right?
Yeah.
Ideally, in every action scene, and I write crime fiction, so they're action scenes, you want it to reveal something about the person. And you want it to sound like what it is. Let me explain that.
Please.
If I'm writing a violent action scene, I'm going to use a lot of harsh consonants, a lot of plosive consonants, and short syllables. Okay, bang, 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 bang. Pop, 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 right? If I'm writing a love scene, which I prefer to think of the sex scenes as love scenes, I want the soft consonants. I want the long vowels. Yeah. Because I want that tenderness. I want that intimacy. I want it to slow down a little bit in most of them. There are some cases in sex scenes where I don't want that because there's something weird going on between the two people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So whether it's an action scene or a love scene, I try to write it like music.
That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's really nice. And I'm also reminded of page 38 in The Godfather when Lucy Mancini and Sonny, as a 8-year-old boy, I read the scene quite a few times.
Yeah.
And you realize that these are such journeys for your reader.
Mm-hmm.
It actually makes me feel great to know that there is such process, technique, thoughtfulness. Like, I've never thought of this before. The difference in syllables,
Yeah.
syllable count. As you say, the kind of consonants you're choosing to use. This isn't random that
No.
you end up writing successfully.
Yeah, you don't always have the choice of the words and the consonants. Sometimes the meaning, you can't find that word that's right, but very often you can. The other thing I do a lot is I'll step back from that computer screen to where I can not see the words, but just the shape on the page. So if it's like an action scene, there are times when I just want to grab the reader by the front of the shirt and not let them go, right, until I'm done with that action scene. So you're not getting off this bus, right, until this is over. And so if I'm looking at that from a slight distance, from like here to that speaker, let's say, it should look black. It should look dense,
Yeah.
right? But there are other times when I want the reader to stop. I want to focus the reader on maybe one or two words that mean a lot more than that one or two words, that are just important for the story or the character. Or I just want the reader to breathe, right? And in that case, there has to be negative space. There has to be a lot of white around those two words. Otherwise, the reader's eye's just going to go do-do-do-do-do-do-do right past them. I want to stop the reader's eyes, right, and look at just that word or just those two words.
I think it's so illuminating for me, and I'm sure for people listening, to a master craftsman. It's not random. There's technique involved, and technique that's taken years and years to hone.
A syllable can change a chapter.
So, not only, though, are you a master craftsman when it comes to the art of writing, but I have watched with great admiration and awe over the years about your marketing capacity, which is a big part of the business of writing, the game of writing. Tell me a little bit about where that developed, because it almost feels like a parallel track in your career.
It's not me. It's not me. It's my agent Shane. I don't know specifically what you're talking about. If you're talking about like the recent videos.
Yes. So the Gardner. Have you guys seen the videos with the Gardner brothers? Do yourselves a favor. For those of you who haven't seen it, these are this Irish dancing brothers. If you're having a bad day, never mind the books that he writes. Just click on the Gardner brothers. And watch them. So there's one, they do Hall & Oates, You Make My Dreams Come True, as they're holding up the book. And you're like, what is going on here? I haven't felt this good in days. I also need to buy the book. So where does that come from?
It doesn't come from me. I gotta pass on this one. I've been very honest with you now.
Yes, you
Come on,
have.
I've been very forthright and probably a bit more revealing than I would probably like to be. But no, that's not me. That's Shane.
Do you
That's
think about marketing? You don't give this a
I
thought.
never
All
think-
all you're concerned about is product?
Right. I don't know the numbers of books that sell. I don't. I don't do the marketing. I stay in my lane. You know, by the time a book comes out, I'm one or two books past that. I think you always should be in love with the woman you're dancing with, you know? And so I'm so totally absorbed in that book that I'm working on, you know, and that's what I do, and that's what I need to do.
All right, so that leads me to the last area of discussion. Before I know we want to get to some questions from the audience, I just want to talk about one more thing, which is that there's no more books.
Yeah.
Because you're retiring.
Yeah.
Why? You're at the top of your game. Why walk away? Is it like a real retirement? Is it a Billy Martin retirement? Like, what's going on here?
I think that we're at a point in American democracy that's an existential crisis. I've thought that for a while. I started doing this Twitter stuff 5 years ago. A few years before that, I took out some ads and prominent papers on some issues because I felt if I did not do that, I was just another guy making money off dope. But around 2016, and you all can do the math, I felt strongly that there were things that were wrong. And I'm not a big name, but I have something of an audience and something of a platform. And I thought I should use that platform to speak out on those things. And then my agent and co-conspirator and best buddy Shane Salerno and I decided also, in addition to my tweets, to do videos.
You've had some big name help.
Bruce Springsteen, Jeff Daniels, some other folks. Thank you. And to my shock, we've had 250 million views on those videos. We did one to talk to people in Pennsylvania before the last general election that had 10 million views. Similarly in Michigan. So look, I don't want to be writing books just for the sake of publishing or just for the sake of a paycheck. And I think that at this moment in time that whatever talents I possess are better used in this fight. And you can't do everything.
One last follow on that before we go to the audience. I moved to North Carolina in the early 1990s, right after the Harvey Gantt, Jesse Helms Senate race, in which Michael Jordan famously said, because he wouldn't endorse Harvey Gantt, and he was asked why not, and he said because Republicans buy sneakers too, and he didn't want to tick off half the buying public. Republicans buy books too, Don. So if you retire, who cares? Or you just don't care at all if this affects book sales?
If you're going to make a choice between Don Winslow selling a few more books and the future of American democracy, that's not a choice. That's a gimme putt, right? So do I lose some readers? Again, I don't know. I don't know how to track those demographics. I certainly get the DMs and the emails of what I call the shut up and type variety. Just write the books and keep your stupid mouth shut. I get the hate mail, a lot of it. Doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't. That was a rhetorical question, but let me answer it. It doesn't matter. I think that we're at this moment that either we're going to keep our democracy, we're going to have equal rights for everybody, or we're going to slide into the sort of shoddy neo-fascism that the previous administration represented. And I think that people like me, there are a lot of us, can speak in plain and simple, and yes, sometimes harsh language. I've been accurately accused of that. Mm-hmm. These people are bullies. And what you need to do with a bully is you punch them in the nose, and then they go sobbing to teacher. Oh, the media was so mean to me. Winslow said bad things about me. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. We need to be doing more of that. And so that's what I'm going to do.
Punch, not type. Do we have anybody who wants to ask Don a question in the audience? There's a gentleman right there. You want to use my microphone?
First of all, thank you to both of you. And I have to say, I've been to a few of these. I have rarely seen the kind of candor and willingness to reveal yourself that both of you have shared with us tonight. So thank you for that. I actually have two questions. The first of which is, what was your routine before, your writing routine before you could do it full time? Mm-hmm. And then the second being, Your advocacy work is largely nonfiction. So are there different rules for fiction versus nonfiction?
Yeah, two great questions. My routine before I could become a full-time writer, sir, in all candor, was that there couldn't be a routine. Do you know what I mean? I never knew. If you're a private investigator, it's not 9 to 5. You know, you never kind of know when you're going to be off duty. And then, you know, had an infant and then a toddler. And so whenever I had a spare 10 minutes, 5 minutes, half an hour, I'd sit down and write. And this is what I say to people now. Aspiring writers who can't be full-time writers, I think the mistake we make is saying, I'm going to write a book this year. No, you're not. You have a spouse, you have kids, you have a job, you have responsibilities. What you are going to do, though, is write a page on Tuesday, a page on Wednesday. And what I'm always trying to tell people is do the doable. Do the doable. Don't set an unrealistic goal, because what happens, and I'll tell you this from personal experience, you won't make it, and then you'll get down on yourself, and then you'll stop. So instead of doing that, I understand I'm preaching, and I'll stop in a second, but I'm in church. When will I get the chance? If you can say, I can write a page a day or 2 pages a day and stick to it, do the math. In about a year, you have a book. So I'm always saying, do the doable, but do it. But do it. As to your second question, is there a difference between the fiction writing and the nonfiction writing? Of course. You know, I pretty insistent on sticking to the facts in the nonfiction one, where, you know, in my other world, I spend all day with people who don't actually exist. You know, then they always do what I tell them to, and if they don't, I delete them. We should all live like that, but it's tough when you go home at 5 o'clock and your wife will not speak the script that you've written for her. It's rather stubborn in that regard.
Hi, thanks. I echo the other gentleman's comments.
Oh.
Are there books or authors who make you insanely jealous, and why?
Oh, constantly. Constantly. Listen, there's so many great writers out there, you know, and there are times when I'll read something, darn, we'll edit that out, right? I wish I'd written that. I could list them forever, you know. I mean, on this tour, I always bring like one paperback book, right? Because luggage. And so I this morning I finished George Eliot's Middlemarch. Well, I'm insanely jealous, you know. Right now, back there in the green room, I have Great Expectations, which I'm rereading. You know, that's so good. But in my genre, yeah, you know, Raymond Chandler, absolute poetry, noir poetry. The irreplaceable Elmore Leonard, whom I still mourn. You know, yeah, thank you, yeah. There's so many. Charlie Willeford, you know, Bruce Springsteen. You know, the greatest American poet since Walt Whitman. You know, so many, sir.
You sent me a book, or it was about Dallas and the assassination of Lou Berney. How good is he?
How good is Lou Berney? November Road. I'm hoping to have dinner with Lou in Oklahoma City in a few weeks. My wife and I drive cross country every year. Hit Oak City this year. Yeah, Lou Berney's fantastic. Thanks for bringing up his name.
It's wonderful that you're here. You can hear me? Okay. Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you. And, you know, about this retirement and also the politics, there are a lot of stories that seem to could be told, like the Mueller report, for example. You know, there's stories like if they were dramatized, real life things, and being an investigator, it seems like maybe using your storytelling skills to tell some of these stories that have actually been happening to make people understand them, like you did with the cartel stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be understood that people they don't really have a handle on it.
Yeah.
And you have a gift at making it clear. So I just thought maybe it's something to think about.
Well, that's very kind of you, sir. I think right now, the German military historian Clausewitz said famously that you should always fight a battle on the ground of your own choosing. That's great, but it's not always possible. And I think that the battleground now is social media. And I think that the way to tell those stories, again, is short, simple, tough. And so I think at this point, your comment's very kind, and I thank you for it. But I really think that the best thing for me to do is what I'm planning on doing. But thank you.
Sort of a follow-up to that general area. And first of all, thank you again for being here, and Jim for doing this.
Yeah.
Thanks to both of you. Political optimism is in short supply, as we know, and I'm trying to understand your decision to hang up your keys and focus more on video messaging as an expression of optimism in the face of despair. And I wonder how you yourself see when you move the needle or not. What effect are you having? Are you preaching to the choir?
Right.
Or are you actually making some
Yeah.
sort of
Great
political
question.
benefit?
I've
How do you
certainly
judge that
thought.
yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I've certainly thought a lot about that. What we've been told about the videos is that they have had an effect. The candidates have told us that. Okay, candidates have sometimes said, it's better than our campaign stuff. We know that we had 10 million views of, for instance, our Pennsylvania and also our Michigan videos. If you looked at the margins of difference in those two states, I hope we made a difference, and I think we made. I'm not saying we won those, please, but I think we contributed. You always worry about preaching to the faithful, but there's a benefit to preaching to the faithful, because the faithful have to get fired up. The faithful have to get out there and vote. The faithful who have the resources need to donate to candidates. The faithful need to also get on social media and speak out and let people know you're there. And so I think that's all of a benefit. We had a conversation earlier about optimism and pessimism. I can be the most pessimistic guy in the world. I can go into a dark place, that Celtic brooding, play old Irish songs and get angry and sentimental and, hate England and that kind of stuff. But what does it do you? What do you do then? Do you curl up on the couch in a fetal ball and wait for the end of the world? Do we just simply walk away and let thugs take over our country? You can't. You can't. I think I'm getting sententious here, but we owe it to our ancestors and we owe it to our children and our grandchildren, whether we feel optimistic or pessimistic, just to go left, right, left, right. Keep putting one foot in front of the other, doing the next necessary thing.
So let me just I wrestle with this a lot. And I just want to say thank you. First of all, it's a lovely framing thought, our children and our grandchildren. It's a really lovely thought. In my line of work, I hate flying home or driving home from meeting somebody whose work I've admired. And we all do this in our culture. We transfer all these people we've never met, and we imbue them with all kinds of qualities because we like the way they write or sing or paint or act. Sometimes you meet them and they're horrendous. And no names, but it happens. I would like to articulate a sense of gratitude, I think on behalf of the room, for spending some time with a guy who actually exceeds my already high opinion just based on your work. So thank you for coming here, spending some time with us, and again, sell a zillion more books before you retire, but then we all wish you the very best. Thank you.